Now, I've spoken a lot about the negative aspects of the physical therapy field. I've said many times that our field is a disaster, it is in complete shambles, and all of that is very true. Most companies are completely corrupt in outpatient. They're seeing multiple patients at a time. The burnout rate is exponentially growing every single year with physical therapists. It's all over the YouTube and forums of young therapists, only a few years in, that are leaving the field. And of course, nowadays you have a severe problem if you leave the field with only a few years in, because most of you have an average of about $150K in debt, thanks to the APTA making this a doctorate program. And of course, if you have followed this channel at all, you have seen all my videos about the negativity of this field. And I don't think it's going to change. It's not going to change in the course of my life, I don't think. But I've done my bit. I'm mostly retired. I did it the right way. I did not see multiple patients at a time in the outpatient. I didn't see 2 patients at a time back in my days of working the skilled nursing when everybody else was dovetailing. And I'll tell you how I managed this, because as much negative that's in our profession, I have managed to become early retired. Out of the first 24 years I practiced in physical therapy, 6 of those years was vacation. I've had complete control over my career every step of the way. So at the urging of one of my professor friends, he's a professor in a physical therapy school, I wrote a short guidebook for PTs. It's a PT travel guidebook. I've written a few books in my time, fiction and nonfiction. Really wasn't interested in writing a book for the physical therapy profession, but this professor friend of mine said it'd be very beneficial, so I went ahead and did it. And yeah, you're going to see me plug this book with these videos. But I'm also saying, if you're not going to be an ethical therapist, do not buy my guidebook. I don't want your money. As I said, I'm early retired. This PT travel guidebook is for therapists who want to practice ethically. The rest of you, which is the majority of you, don't bother. Right now, if you're a new graduate, you are in that approximately to $130,000 to $150,000 in debt. That is a huge amount of money for basically an entry-level degree. It wasn't right or fair that the APTA did this to you. I'm sorry it happened to you. But most of you are approximately 25 years old when you graduate. I have a way out for you to pay this debt off quickly and also take complete control of your career. In other words, practice one-on-one the way you should be doing. Practice only in ethical clinics and have a complete position in life where it's either your way or the highway, and that's to be that travel therapist. Now, I've always had that adventure path in me. I could never sit still in one place. I was in the military, roaming all over the world for a few years, and that habit stuck with me throughout my physical therapy career as well. But when I graduated physical therapy school, I wasn't even really aware what a travel therapist was. Yeah, I knew they were out there. I'd heard of it, but I really didn't look into it too much. My plan upon graduation was to buy an RV and just go from place to place and be a temporary worker. And then I found out that the travel companies actually pay the rent for you, or give you a huge per diem amount so you can pay it with a lot of money left over. So I dropped the whole RV idea. This is how you pay off your debt, new grad, and that has to be your main priority. You need to get that monkey off your back of that student debt as fast as you can. Because yes, I'm bashing the physical therapy profession left and right, and it deserves it. But I also want to help the new graduates who want to be ethical. I want them to get out of this field everything that I got out of the field, because I got to be a good practitioner. And I got to be a good practitioner because I was treating patients one-on-one and always have since day one. Just because the profession is a complete soup sandwich everywhere else doesn't mean it has to be that way for you. And a lot of that depends on not getting locked down in one facility, because even a facility that's good when you start may get taken over by a conglomerate, may have a change in management, suddenly the land of great ideas come in, they start wanting to overlap patients, etc., etc. And then most people just usually fold, and then they're very bitter about their careers later. Let's go ahead and talk about that physical therapist traveler, the pros and the cons. So what are the pros? Well, first, of course, there is the money. And if you contract in places like remote Alaska, a lot of times the housing is free. Also in some of the remote towns in the Northwest as well. And you still get per diem for living expenses even though the house is free. And that gives you the opportunity in the first 2 or 3 years out of school to wipe out your loans. And you're not even going to suffer while you do it. You're going to be traveling around the country having a lot of fun. You buy a used car, not a new car. You watch your budget. You don't overspend. And then you just keep raking in the money. Many times with that free rent I'm talking about, all of you need to head to Alaska. And if you don't completely wipe out your loans in 3 years, you'll have so much of them paid off that the interest will no longer be a problem. So that's the first pro of being a travel therapist. The second pro is the adventure path. It is amazing the places that I have been over the last quarter of a century because most of my time has been as a traveler. I've only been a permanent staff therapist for a couple years total in the quarter of a century that I've practiced. I was in Petaluma, California, a hair's breadth from Bodega Bay, and I was being put up at an executive suite motel at the Quality Inn. My travel assignment was in Sonoma in the Napa Valley, right down the street from Jack London State Park, the mountains, that Bodega Bay I was talking about. And I wasn't paying a dime for living expenses outside of my own food and essentials. I've been in remote Alaska many times. All these remote fishing towns with mountains on one side and a bay on the other side. I've been to the North Woods of Maine. All these places that the tourists spend thousands of dollars just to visit for a week. I lived there and was getting paid. And didn't even have to pay rent in those places in remote Alaska. But what's another huge pro of being a travel therapist? Well, you're going to avoid the burnout for much longer because you can take as much vacation time as you want. Yes, your recruiter would prefer that you just take one contract after another indefinitely, but you don't have to. You can take a week, 3 weeks, 3 months, or a year between contracts. You can let years go by before you touch base with your recruiter again. All these other permanent staff therapists only get about 3 weeks off a year by the time you add in the PTO and everything else, and you get as much vacation as you want. Even as you're crushing those loans in the first year, you should be taking weeks off at a time between contracts. And then in a few years when your student loans are vaporized and you've got some stocks and investments and savings, then you're not taking weeks off between contracts, you're taking months. Now, there are a couple cons to being a travel physical therapist. And most of these cons aren't going to affect you at a whole 25 to 27 years old. But the first one is, yes, you do have a sense that you have no tribe. Now for me, I'm a professional loner, so it really doesn't matter, but every once in a while it does to me. It still gets to me a little bit. Where you don't really have a neighborhood where your friend across the street invites you over for a beer and barbecue and you do the same for him. There is a bit of a feeling of displacement at times, even for professional gypsies like myself. But, as I said, if you could just handle that for a couple years, then your student debt would be wiped out and you never have to worry about that again. And one of the other cons of being a travel therapist, it's not really a big one, but they can cut your contract short anytime they feel like it. They only need about a week's notice. Now that's not a big deal because your recruiter can place you pretty quick, and usually I use 3 recruiters from 3 different companies because there's a limited number of clinics that I'm willing to work for. If you want to ask me why, please see all my previous videos. But you can set yourself up with 3 or 4 different travel companies, 3 or 4 different recruiters. And if you're licensed in a few states, then you'll be able to pretty much get consistent work. And yes, if you want to work at ethical places, you're probably going to have to turn down anywhere from 70 to 80% of offers. And most of these offers I turn down, I don't even get to the interview now because I've been around for so long, I know who's good and who's bad. But yeah, you gotta be willing to move on a week's notice. That's part of being a professional gypsy. But I haven't found this to be a very big con at all. Now, the biggest con I see for being a travel therapist, especially since most of you are on the younger side, many of you are new graduates, and that's dating. Dating is tough as a traveler, basically because wherever you're at, nobody really wants to invest in you. And what happens a lot of time is it becomes fly-by-night with other travelers. Now, I have seen relationships of people who met in the travel world, and sometimes they travel together, which only makes both of them more money. Or they stay in the same region and do the moderate distance relationship route. It's very hard when one person's in Maine and another person's in Alaska. I've seen more than one relationship fail on that attempt. But yeah, dating is an issue. It's a lot tougher to date as a traveler than it is as a permanent staff. And those are really the only cons I see of being a travel physical therapist. And for me, the pros greatly outweigh the cons for sure. But one of the major points of why you need to be a travel therapist, as I state in my guidebook, isn't the money, isn't the adventure path, it's having control over your career. When you're a travel therapist, it's your way or the highway. First of all, you got the ability to pick exactly where you want to work, what contract you want to take. And I'll be presenting more videos on how to vet out your recruiters, how to get good contracts, how to interview and know if the place is trying to pull one over on you, because a lot of these managers and directors will lie to you about the nature of their facility. I'll tell you the mistakes I made so you can avoid them. But the end point is you get to pick the type of contracts you want. And as I said, if you're one of these therapists, which is probably the majority of therapists out there who just want high-priced contracts and you're going to see 2 to 4 patients at a time, just get off this video. Or look at my previous videos and then look in the mirror and decide to change. But for those out there who actually want to practice ethically, this is the way to do it. Because the contracts generally run 3 months. And if you get to the facility and find out that whoever interviewed you did snow you, you can immediately drop a 30-day notice to end the contract. And I'll be talking about how to exit a contract a little more gracefully than I did in my younger days, because I ended up using a bunch of my energy resources on being blindly angry at these directors for lying to me, even though I was in the right, when I could have just let risk management handle it and dropped 30 days notice. But with all my videos of bashing this field, which is justified, I'm also going to be putting out videos on how to help you young therapists have the best you can in what's become a god-awful profession. Because there's a lot of people who are miserable in the profession. I wasn't one of them. Matter of fact, there was once an old movie I saw called The Gambler with John Goodman. And Goodman was telling Wahlberg's character about being in the position of F you. And honestly, that's exactly the position you want to be in. You want to be in a position where they need you, but you don't need them at all. And there's a million travel companies fighting to get your business, which keeps the recruiters in check as well. So in summary, not only can you get your debt paid off relatively quickly, you can be in this position of FU, and you won't be one of these burnouts that you keep seeing all over the forums. Because if you get control over your career where it is your way or the highway, you'll be able to say at the end of the day that you did exactly for which you were placed on this terrain, that you were a physical therapist.